Ah, healers, we did not forget about you. How could we, since you are the main reasons we are able to time keys. Healer specs everywhere, but which spec is better to time Mythic Plus keys than the other spec? Well, we're gonna be ranking them today from S tier to D tier and see who the winner and the losers are in this tier list of Mythic Plus meta for healers. And we're going to start it with Restoration Shaman. Now, I don't remember the order of the healers being this because probably not surprising at all to you, Restoration Shaman is going into S tier as the quintessential best healer statistically speaking, or is it the best healer, in the first season of The War Within. There's a bunch of reasons why that's the case, one of which that I think I really want to talk about that people don't actually talk about often enough, at least not in the generic circles, right? In the top end, people know that part of the reason why Restoration Shaman is good and S tier is because of the poison cleansing totem, clearly, since some of the worst type of debuffs that will definitely wipe you are poisons and curses. You don't have a curse cleansing totem, but you do have cleanse spirit or whatever the name is, your basic dispels curses as well, and that is so good, and we'll come back to this in the future. But one of the reasons that I think Restoration Shaman is actually really good that not a lot of people talk about is the bonus HP that it gives your party from Downpour, which is the capstone, and Ancestral Fortitude, something Ancestral. You can see it on the screen right now. Basically, when you heal targets with Healing Wave, Healing Surge, and Riptide, you give them 10% extra HP. And when you put down your Healing Rain, or in this case, Totemic, the Surging Totem, and you use your Downpour ability, you give them 10% extra HP, so it amounts to about 20% extra health, which is quite a lot. That is more than the Warrior's Rallying Cry, by the way. Just a fun fact for you. And this is not a cooldown, it's just passive HP boost. And that 20% extra HP matters a lot when there are a lot of, I don't really want to call them one-shots, but even at lower key levels, the ones that we do, some stuff hits so hard, and having 20% extra HP is so good when I heal on non-Restoration Shaman healers and at the same key level, and people like die just because of the last stick, but on Resto Shaman they just survive because of that last stick, because of the 20% extra HP. Just feels incredibly good, and the throughput is not bad either. I don't think it has the highest throughput out of all of the healers, and its damage is also a little bit lackluster, which kind of sucks, and that's going to be important going into the next one. But as it stands, Restoration Shaman is in a very good spot. It obviously brings Bloodlust, it brings all of the toolkit that essentially counteracts some of the worst mechanics that the season has to offer, so you definitely should give Resto Shaman a try and play it. What? You don't have World of Warcraft yet? No problem. You can buy it cheap on Kinguin. What? You want to play 1,337 other games too? No problem. You can buy them quick on Kinguin. Kinguin is an online platform that offers games, prepaid cards, and gift cards at much lower prices, whether they be for WoW or even game time. Click the link down below and use our code MARCE, that's M-A-R-C-E, for an 8% discount. Thank you, Kinguin. And now, the second healer that we need to talk about, that there's a lot of discussions to be had with Discipline Priest, now that we've just talked about Restoration Shaman, because Discipline Priest is also into S tier. Now, I don't know if everybody will agree, and that never really happened, so that's fine, but Discipline Priest has been catching up to Restoration Shaman in the last couple of weeks in terms of the overall key levels that they push, and they're very close. They're kind of neck and neck. In terms of popularity, Restoration Shaman just knocks Discipline out of the park and pretty much every other healer, period, but Discipline is actually coming in strong, and there are a couple of reasons why that's true. You don't have the dispels that Restoration Shaman has, which is a problem for poison and curse. However, all of the high keys that have a discipline in it that I've been able to see, and I've kind of scrolled through the top dozens and dozens, and probably like over 100 top keys, Discipline always runs with a shaman in their group. So I don't think that's a coincidence. It definitely has to do with the fact that Discipline really struggles with poison cleansing and curse cleansing or curse dispelling, whatever. And it just so happens that one of the best DPSers in the game. Elemental Shaman and Enhancement Shaman are also taken into the high keys, and they can bring pretty much the utility kit that Restoration brings with no downsides, no difference. Like, there's no big difference in terms of what Resto brings and what an Elemental brings. The totem cooldown is the same, the dispels are the same, and that really matters. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why Discipline can actually keep up with Restoration Shaman in pushing keys. There's also the fact that Discipline just has like crazy AoE healing, which is really good. And if you look at this particular data on screen, you can see that most of its healing, if not the majority of it, is coming from Atonement, which implies a bunch of stuff. First of all, it's very efficient healing. Second of all, means that you're constantly going to be doing damage to get that healing out. And it just so happens that Discipline is actually the highest DPS healer out there in the current meta, which, from what I understand, contributes to its value to a group. I mean, you know, everything contributes to the value of the group, of course. And it's not just that it's the best damage dealer healer, it's twice as good as any other healer. But, you know, it's DPS for healers in the end, which is not that high as it used to be in the past, where it would just like break the whole structure, because that's why you still see other healers taken into the high keys. And you can add to this the Discipline kit, which is really good for certain mechanics like the dome and the pain suppression. Having damage reduction on cooldowns is very, very good, particularly for DPSers that might be a little bit squishy, like that Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shamans and Elemental Shamans are not as squishy as they once used to be, but they still are squishier than most. And the fact that Discipline brings that DR helps when the Shamans can bring what Discipline lacks. So it's all coming together in this beautiful synergy. Moving forward with Holy Paladin, a personal favorite of mine. Holy Paladin is kind of like middle of the pack, but saying middle of the pack is weird because middle of the pack means A tier. Holy Paladin is very close to the top healers. It's quite a bit behind, but it doesn't really feel fair to put it any lower than A tier. The keys that it's doing are pretty high. I think they're about at 14s right now, 13s, 14s, some of the top Holy Paladins out there. And that's really close, might be even 15s by the time you watch this video, because, you know, the new patch has just hit live and we're getting all of these new changes, which I don't know if they will change Holy Paladin too much, but it will definitely not nerf it. I mean, from what I understand. Holy Paladin is kind of like the opposite of Discipline Priest in that its AoE healing is good, but it has more spot healing. Its AoE healing is a little bit more conditioned by how you rotate your globals, but you do have Poison Dispel, which Priest does not. You don't really have Curse Dispel, but you're probably going to be running in a key with like a mage or maybe a shaman, since you obviously don't bring Bloodlust yourself. Your tank doesn't bring Bloodlust, although it should, so you will need one of those anyway, and any Bloodlust spec that's currently meta will also bring a Curse Dispel, funnily enough. And Holy Paladin has been nerfed by the devs a bunch of times ever since beta, so we're probably not going to see it rise too high unless we get some big buffs, but the kit is actually really good. The damage is better than all the other healers except Discipline Priest, which says a lot considering that, you know, Holy Paladin is still a melee healer, and to be fair, in a high key, you don't end up DPSing as much as you used to. There's not enough time, right? You're going to be casting your heals a lot more. And by casting, I just mean, you know, Holy Shocking Word of Glory. There are builds that can factor in Flashlight or Holy Light, but I've seen Holy Paladins kick some of the high keys in the Nards without even ever casting one of those. So that's not the end of the world. It's just a really good healer all around. And the utility kit with the bops, with the you know, clearing the bleeds, freedoms, and all of that is going to be very good, particularly in keys that are very difficult, like City of Threads. Now, moving on to Holy Priest, not so great of a success story. Holy Priest is actually going into B tier. I don't really want to spoil the rest of the tier list, but I do have to say that this is the worst healer at the moment in Mythic Plus, which is great considering that it's only B tier. It's a key or two level max behind everybody else, which is not a lot. It's still pretty high up there, but it's at a significant loss compared to Discipline Priest, considering that it doesn't bring the damage reduction that Discipline does. From what we can see, sometimes the throughput can be okay, but it's not as efficient as it would be for a Discipline Priest. Obviously, it's lacking the same dispel, so you're going to be running Holy Priest with kind of like the same configuration with at least a shaman or a mage in your group. Mages are not as meta as they once used to be, so it's likely going to be a shaman, which also means that you're going to be having that poison cleansing totem almost guaranteed in the highest of the keys. And just to circle around once more to the issue with priest healing, that you don't have these dispels, you are essentially kind of carried by shamans. I don't know how the meta would look like, or at least for priests in this situation, if shamans wouldn't be so good. You might be running a balanced druid, and balanced druid can also clear both curses and poisons. You're never gonna run feral druids. You might also be running with a bear druid, which is, you know, the second best tank in the game, that can also bring some of that utility that maybe you might not be able to get from a shaman. But there's no poison cleansing, dispelling in the game that can rival poison cleansing totem. I'll tell you that much. Mistweaver is doing a little bit better, however, nothing particularly amazing about it. It is not this year. It wishes. But it is a solid healer. You can dispel poisons, you can dispel diseases with Mistweaver, and you have renewal as well, which is something that you can use for AoE dispels. Not as often as a poison cleansing totem, but once again, likely that since shamans are so good, you probably will be using one of them going into the higher of keys. Shaman is weirdly enough in a better position than mage at the moment overall, but we'll see how the meta advances. So far, the throughput is obviously really great. Mistweaver just pumps. The damage is not that amazing compared to Discipline and Holy Paladin, even though you are actively doing a lot of damage, considering that you're playing stuff like Rising Mist and the Stomp, Jadefire Stomp talents as well, to deal some healing by, you know, rotating your damage abilities. With that being said, Mistweaver is pretty solid, considering that Monk is in a weird situation where Brewmaster is one of the toughest tanks to bring into high keys, and Windwalker is kind of neither here nor there. It's a little bit below average in terms of performance. You might be happier with the Mistweaver in your team, I would imagine, considering that it's also clearing keys high enough to be in the A tier, at least in our biased tier list. Moving to preservation, one of the healers that was speculated to be one of the best, if not the best ones this season is, it's not that bad, it's A tier. It's also been nerfed. I think it's a little bit ahead of Mistweaver. However, it is an Evoker, and Evokers do come with the diminishing returns of there's probably already an augmentation in your group if you are pushing the highest of keys, although not all of the high keys are done with augmentation at this time, but that's maybe because we've seen considerable nerfs to some of the keys. It's likely once people get into more 16s, which is what they're hitting at the moment, maybe even 17s, you probably will see more augmentations, since that's probably where they cannot be ignored. It does knock preservation off a peg because all of the utility that preservation brings can be brought better by an augmentation, and its healing is not anything amazing. Its damage doesn't feel like it's amazing either. It's fine, it's fine. It does receive, or it did actually receive some buffs, I believe, in the 11.05 patch, especially to Flame Shaper. I know we've talked about them in our wrap-up show. I don't know if those are enough to change its position in the tier list. I mean, and at the end of the day, A tier is not bad. It's, you know, it's A tier, okay? And last but not least, Resto Druid. Funny enough, Resto Druid has been in a very tough position so far, and has been very unpopular, had struggled a lot with throughput, and it has received buffs in the last couple of weeks, and I think we're seeing the buffs act, because I will be a little bit bold and put it at the top of the A tier, because some of the highest ranked Resto Druids are pushing keys higher than some of the highest ranks Holy Paladins at the moment. It's also a Druid. It definitely brings more value to a party in this season, more so than a Paladin would, more so than a lot of the other specs would, because obviously your Dispel handles the worst types of Dispels that we have to deal with, curses and poisons. Once again, you also bring a Battle Res, which is really good. The damage is not amazing, it's not that bad. You are, at the end of the day, still a Druid. Mark of the Wild is really good, particularly if you're running a Prot Warrior, since Balanced Druid doesn't seem to push as high anymore, so you're probably going to be the Mark of the Wilder of your team, although, to be fair, Balance is pushing keys higher than Resto Druid. But the chances of you having a both Resto Druid and a Balance Druid in the same group are particularly low if you want to push keys and want some kind of diversity. Maybe you want an Arcane Intellect, maybe you want a... You don't want a Battle Shout, you just want a Prot Warrior, because the Prot Warrior does not die, but you're probably going to run a Death Knight, so that takes away a slot that would be used for a buff gainer, and likely, let's be honest, you might have an augmentation in your team, right? So the slots where you can fit in some of those raid buffs, or group buffs rather, just keep shrinking, okay? So that's probably where Restoration Druid also shines. I don't know how tanky it is. I mean, I cannot really compare what keys we do with Restoration Druid, but I was healing some 7s and 8s severely undergeared, and I felt oddly safe. I still have to shift into Bear, that's fucking never going away. But some of the throughput healing that you can do with Restoration Druid feels really strong, particularly combining Soul of the Forest with Nature Swiftness and all of that can, you know, explode some of my body's HP bar. It still cannot compare with some of the top healers, but considering that I believe a couple of weeks ago it was at the bottom of the list in pretty much all tiers and all aspects of the game, seeing it in A tier is really good. Now, this might change, of course, once again until the end of the season, but it's great to see that the entire pool of healers are essentially spread in like 3 tiers, and S tier already has 2 specs. It's a good time to be a healer in terms of balance. You might feel the lack of certain utility kits if you're playing stuff like Holy Priest, more so than any other healer, but you can compensate by bringing some of the top meta specs, which do bring the utility kit that you are lacking. And you might think that that would be a problem, lacking serious kits and dungeons being a little bit punishing, and you would be right. And we did talk about that in our video where we kind of think Mythic Plus is worse than it has been, which is a weird situation since a lot of people are still playing it. But there is a problem with Mythic Plus. Check it out.